Ambassador Herzog, welcome, or should I say welcome back to Washington, D.C. I know you're no stranger to this city.
That's correct. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm honored to be here and represent Israel in the U.S. and work for the U.S.-Israel relations.
Well, Ambassador Michael Herzog assumed the office of Ambassador of Israel to the United States on November 15th, a few months after his appointment by Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. The ambassador is a retired IDF brigadier general, and he held senior positions in Israel's Ministry of Defense between 2001 and 2009. During this time, Ambassador Herzog worked with 4 ministers of defense as a senior military aide and then as chief of staff. The ambassador's career has also included service as head of the IDF's Strategic Planning Division. He was also a member of the Intelligence Corps, and he was an infantry soldier in 1973. Since 1993, Ambassador Herzog has played a key role in the Arab-Israeli peace process, participating in most of Israel's negotiations with the Palestinians, Jordanians, and Syrians. In his capacity as a peace negotiator, the ambassador has participated in the Y Plantation Summit, the Camp David Summit, the Taba negotiations, the Annapolis Summit, and the 2013-2014 peace negotiations led by U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry. From 2009 to 2014, he served as special emissary to Israel's prime minister in the efforts to relaunch the peace process. Prior to his nomination, Ambassador Herzog had been an international fellow at the International Institute for Near East Policy and a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute. Ambassador Herzog was also the director of the Forum of Strategic Dialogue, where he engaged in consultations between Europe and Israel's top governmental officials and experts in the fields of defense, security, foreign affairs, and economics. Ambassador Herzog is a graduate of the prestigious National Defense College in Israel. He received an MA from Haifa University and a BA from Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Again, Ambassador Herzog, welcome. Nice to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Well, as you take up your new post here in Washington, what are your goals, your expectations, and aspirations for the U.S.-Israel bilateral relationship?
Well, as I noted, I'm honored to be here and work for the U.S.-Israel relations. We are friends, allies, and partners. The United States is Israel's closest ally and the most important one. We have shared values, shared beliefs, shared interests. It doesn't mean that we agree on everything or see eye to eye on everything, but these relations are perhaps the most important relations that Israel has. And I intend to invest in them and to espouse them and to do my best effort to advance the Israeli-US cooperation, partnership, and friendship in any way I can.
Well, with regard to the Iran issue, if we could move on to that, it's on everybody's minds. There are talks going on in Vienna. I'd like to focus on the Vienna talks with this question. How do you assess 2 scenarios? If the talks proceed to a return to the JCPOA, or if they fail completely, which is another possibility?
So there is an implicit assumption in your question with which I agree, and that is that we are nearing a critical junction where things will be determined, whether on the one hand there is a diplomatic outcome to be had and what kind of a diplomatic outcome, and if not, what should be the strategy for a no-deal situation. I think that will probably be decided in the next few months because, as we all know, negotiations have been dragging on and on. I'm not sure there is a way or it's possible to go back to the original deal because Iran advanced its nuclear program to a point where the baseline shifted and it developed knowledge, know-how, and capabilities in terms of advanced centrifuges, missiles, and many more elements of its nuclear program. And this knowledge cannot be erased, and we're not the same baseline as was the case in 2015. Now we're in the end of 2021, approaching 2022. A lot has changed, and the Iranian program is at a very different point. So I believe the options are either, if there is still a diplomatic option, I'm not sure the Iranians are interested, because if they are, they have a strange way of showing it. Either a smaller deal, what some people call less for less. It remains to be seen what exactly this means, what kind of deal we're talking about, what the Iranians give, what the Iranians get. Does it include full restoration of inspection? Is there a rollback? Ultimately, we have to see what people are talking about. And if not, where are we headed with Iran? Because if there's no deal, I assume they will continue to enrich, they will continue to develop their nuclear program. One way or another, whether there is a deal, whether there's no deal, I think it's time the international community draws a line. Because the troubling picture we've seen over the last year was that of negotiations being carried out, and simultaneously Iran pushes forward its nuclear program, crosses one forbidden line after another, reaches 20%, 60%, and doing many other things. The list is long, without consequences. And the fact that there are no consequences encourages Iran to continue pushing the envelope. So I think, I strongly believe, and that's a belief of my government, that the time has come for the international community to draw a line. Whether diplomacy continues or whether there's no diplomatic solution, one way or another, things have to be decided and a line has to be drawn, and Iran has to face the consequences.
Well, we're watching a real changing Middle East. We just observed the first anniversary of the Abraham Accords and normalization with the UAE, with Bahrain and Morocco. What do you see ahead for this process? And how have the Accords, just in the short year or so, impacted the region?
The Abraham Accords are a game changer. There's no doubt in my mind. This is a strategic development in the Middle East. It changes the strategic balance in the Middle East. I think it represents the breaking of some kind of a glass ceiling that we in Israel faced for many, many years. And we see the region opening up to Israel. Not everybody, there's still a lot of hatred, animosity. There is, I would say, generally speaking, the region, there are many struggles, but one of them is between those who want to move ahead, improve the situation in the region, better the lives of people, provide and offer hope, and those who want to drag us to the dark past and thrive on hatred and so-called resistance. I believe that those who move to normalize relations with Israel and sign peace agreements with us are together with us squarely in the first camp. And we can not only develop a bilateral agenda with those who make peace with us, and we're doing it, but also benefit the region as a whole, because we would like to expand and bring light to the region. Since we signed the normalization accords with the Emiratis and Bahrain, hundreds of thousands of Israelis went to the Gulf. This is a warm peace. It's peace not only between governments, but also between peoples. And the more we deepen it, the more we show people in the region that this is successful, this is a success story, that people in the region benefit from it, the more people would like to join it. I believe there are fair chances that other actors in the region, Arabs or Muslims, will join that trend. I believe it will deepen, it will continue. Since arriving in town, I've been in close touch with some of my Arab colleagues, and we're going to do a lot of work together. And one other interesting phenomenon I want to note is that since we normalized relations with the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, we've seen the warming up of our cold relations with closer countries who've had peace with Israel, like Egypt and Jordan, because I think they look at what's happening, they realize that this is something big, and they don't want to stay behind.
Let's talk about anti-Semitism. It's been spiking everywhere. We see it, of course, in Europe. We see it in the Middle East. We have it right here at home in the United States, an issue that I know that you'll be giving some attention to. How do you view all of this, and how do you see Israel engaging in combating this issue going forward?
So I, of course, follow very closely the spike in anti-Semitism here in the United States. My government does too. There are deliberations as to what course of action should be taken. My own belief is that you have to address the threat of anti-Semitism in a very broad context and to deal with all the dimensions of this terrible phenomenon, education, state measures, legislation, legal action, security. There are many, many dimensions, and we have to address all of them. Back in Israel, there is a discussion whether or not to nominate one centralized address in the government to deal with it, a kind of a project manager. We have now more than one governmental agency dealing with it, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of the Diaspora, and some other agencies, the Jewish Agency. And there is a discussion whether or not to appoint some kind of like project manager. We'll see. I think it's a serious idea that has to be considered, and to work in partnership with organizations and people here in the United States who are at the forefront of fighting this phenomenon and move ahead. A lot of it has to do with public awareness of what's happening. I've been here not long, only 1 month, but I already hear the voices and meet people, and my sense is that the public at large is not sufficiently aware of what's going on and what's happening, and that also has to be addressed.
Well, finally, here's a question that affects each and every one of us, and that's COVID. Israel has really been on the front lines in several areas of combating COVID. What lessons do you think that Israel can share with the rest of the world as we grapple with the pandemic? I mean, when I watch the news, and morning news always is filled with COVID stories from around the world, Israel is always mentioned in the positive context of grappling with the pandemic. What do you say about how Israel can further share its experience on this devastating virus that we've been experiencing here almost the last couple of years?
So it is true that Israel has been leading internationally in taking measures to counter COVID. Israel was the first to start with mass vaccinations. Israel was the first in the world to start with a booster, the third vaccination. There are many lessons to be shared, and our government is in contact with many governments in the world and offering our conclusions. I think one of the main conclusions is about the fact that this has to do with the responsibility not only of the government, but also of each and every citizen. Every one of us carries responsibility, and it starts with us in terms of social distancing, in terms of taking the precautions, vaccinations, and so on and so forth. I think this is number one lesson, and it has to be carried across the board. In a way, Israel has become kind of a big laboratory testing certain solutions on the people, but I say it in a positive sense because I think what we've done this terms prove successful. I know that there are people out there who oppose vaccinations, and there are some debates about this. But all in all, our experience proves that the course the government chose to go down was the right one, and it should be continued. But also, I think it's an important point to note that no country can fight it alone, and only international cooperation can really provide an effective solution. No country is 100% isolated, and viruses cross borders without distinction. Every time we have a new variant reaching our shores, and not always we know where it came from. So without very close international cooperation, I think even if we take the best measures in the world, it's not going to be sufficient. We have to cooperate internationally across the board.
Well, it's only been a month, but we certainly know that you've hit the ground running, because we've covered just a few of the many issues that are on your plate. Ambassador Herzog, thank you very much for your time, for being with us today. And B'nai B'rith, all of us, wish you much success in your new post.
Thank you very much. And my warm regards to B'nai B'rith and to your annual leadership forum. Thank you.
Thank you.